In this lecture, we're going to show you how you can create object and list property types from C++. This may sound confusing at first, but there is a good chance you have seen QML code like this before. You have a QML component, and it has properties that take some other objects as properties. For example, in a list view, you can have a delegate to be another component that you define in here, something like this. This is an object property inside your QML component, and you may have seen also a way to pass a list as a property. Okay, for example, in states and transitions, you can define your states as a list like this and feed that to a property that is called states. We're going to build a C++ type that is called football team. We're going to model a football team, and we want our users in QML to have the ability to set their properties like this. They can have simple string property, title, and coach, but they can also have an object property in which they can pass a player, and they're going to have the ability to specify the players in an array like this. I know you might be thinking this is going to be a bit complex, and it really is, but I am going to try and explain it step by step, and you are going to understand by the end of the lecture. So how do we do this? We start by creating a class in C++ that is going to model our team, and you see that the class has a bunch of properties. We have the title, the coach. This is everything we had seen before. We have an object of player, and we have a pointer to player that we specify as a property here. And it also has a setter, a getter, and a notify signal. We have our list of properties that are exposed as a QML list property. This is actually a way to say that your class is using list properties to assign data to one of your properties that is called players. And if you look down here, we made it very clear that QML list property allows applications to expose list-like properties of object-derived classes to QML. Our classes that we are going to use here, and any class you really want to expose from C++ should derive from QObject. You already know this. You now know that you must create your class and give it a bunch of properties, and one of the properties is going to be the property that is going to take a list. Now, you also need a way to add the data that you specify in QML to the C++ class that you defined, and there are a few callback methods that you define that the QML engine is going to call to manipulate the data that you have in your C++ class. For example, we have a football team class, and when we put a player inside the football team QML element, we need that player to be added to C++, and the QML engine is going to use a bunch of methods that we specify in here in the players getter method. You see, we return a QML list property, and we pass in a bunch of pointers. The first pointer is a link to the object that is going to manage the lifetime of the list property. The second pointer points to the class or the object that holds this QML list property. In this case, it's going to be our football team. And again, we make it clear that the QML engine calls these methods when it needs to manipulate the data that we have in C++. And you see that the first method is going to be a method to append. The second method is going to get the count of the items. This is going to be the number of the players that we have in the team. The third method is a getter to get a player at a particular index. And the last method, you use it to clear the data in your C++ class. Your items are going to be instances of a player class that we're also going to define. And if we try to think in a more abstract way, player is an item of a football team. What we want is to give an easier way for a user to assign a bunch of players to the player's property. This is what we want. You also need to define these methods that the QML engine is going to use to manipulate your class. In the first slide here, we specify that these methods are going to be available. You can also pass null pointers here to specify that you don't have these methods, but it is always a good idea to put them here. So we define them in our class, and we're going to show you how you define this. You see append player takes a list of players, and it also has the player that you want to add. The player count methods has a list over which you're going to return the count. The player method gives you the list and the integer where you want to retrieve the player, and the clear players method takes a list that you're going to manipulate by deleting the other elements. And these are the implementation examples of these methods. Okay, I know all this may be confusing to many of you. This lecture was meant to make you familiar with what is required to build list property features into your C++ class. We're going to stop here, and in the next lecture, we're going to start and build this step by step. I'll see you in the next lecture.